And Dipti Laurent joins me now for a look through the main stories around the world this hour. And Dipti, there's lots of analysis as we commemorate the death of Martin Luther King 50 years ago.
50 years ago to the day, the iconic civil rights leader was delivering, of course, his famous "I Have a Dream" speech in Memphis when he was shot dead. In a way, at least for the British daily The Times, Dr. King had already been walking in the shadow of death for at least a decade before. That's what this writer says. Indeed, when JFK was killed, Dr. King told his wife that he feared that he too would suffer the same fate. The Times does hail Dr. King's restraint, defiance, and courage in the face of adversity, and also hail his legacy because he showed us how to handle populist hate. Now, of course, this commemoration comes at a highly divisive time in U.S. politics with Donald Trump in the White House. He's actually the focus of this cheeky cartoon from another British daily, The Independent. Here he says, "I too had a dream for a man of color in the White House," that color being orange.
And Dipti, you've also found an interesting read written by one of the journalists who was one of the few people on the scene after Martin Luther King's assassination.
His name is Earl Caldwell, and he's actually penned a piece in the New York Daily News website talking about his experience. Here he is in this picture just behind Martin Luther King. As he explains in the New York Daily News, he was at the time a young, ambitious black reporter who'd been assigned to follow Dr. King in Memphis in 1958. This itself, 1968 rather. This itself was quite a feat. He was a young black reporter who was sent to the Deep South at a time of heightened racial tensions. His brief initially was just to follow Dr. King's handling of the trash collectors' strike, something pretty ordinary, which obviously turned into a very historical moment. He recounts in this article that half a century on, he can still remember the sound of that mighty blast that killed Dr. King. The day before, on that very balcony where he died, Caldwell interviewed him and the two men had a personal chat together. He also, in this article, puts his own spin on what may have really happened to Martin Luther King Jr., which you can read all about in this article.
Okay, let's move on now to India, where the papers have been ferociously following the plight of a famed jeweller who's now on the run after being implicated in a fraud scandal.
It's an extraordinary story, Thomas, of a famed jeweler, a billionaire who's on the lam now. His name is Nirav Modi. He's a Belgian-born jeweler who really awed his peers by building a billion-dollar empire. He bejeweled many of Hollywood's actresses and brushed shoulders with India's Prime Minister Nirav Modi. There's no relation between the two men there. Well, now he's on the lam after a state-run Indian bank told regulators that it had found nearly $2 billion worth of fraudulent transactions linked to his bank accounts. It's really making waves in India and across the subcontinent, as the Singapore paper The Straits Times reports. Finding the fugitive has now become a national pastime, with reporters flocking to hotels whenever there's a rumor that he might be there. It's also done, sadly, little to inspire public confidence in state-run banks in India.
And India is one of the many countries participating in the Commonwealth Games, which are kicking off this Wednesday on the Gold Coast in Australia.
That's right. Both our countries actually are involved in the Commonwealth Games. The Games traditionally bring together current and former British colonies as they compete for sporting glory. There is a lot of anticipation, at least among Commonwealth countries. This will be the first Games, for instance, without Usain Bolt in the 100-meter men's sprint. It will really leave the path wide open to his competitors. The youngest competitor is from Wales. She's just 11 years old. Her name is Anne Hersey. She's part of the national table tennis team, the Welsh table tennis team competing on the Gold Coast. The Guardian explains that it'll also be the most gender-equal games with the same number of medal events for men and women. Another person that you might want to look out for is Malaysia's Nicole David. She's looking to get her third gold medal and has been called the Serena Williams of squash.
And finally, there's a storm brewing in the kitchen. That's about one Malaysian contestant taking part in the UK version of the cooking show MasterChef. Tell us more.
Well, it's been called or dubbed Rendang Gate by the Malaysian press. This is after named for the Malaysian and Indonesian coconut curry called rendang. Recently, on the UK version of MasterChef, the cookery show, a Malaysian contestant was eliminated for her take on the chicken rendang, so a chicken version of that rendang curry. Judges said the chicken wasn't crispy enough, and they called her dish a mistake before they booted her off the show. Well, this has set Malaysian social media users on fire. They've slammed the judges for dishonoring their iconic national dish, saying it's a stew and by definition the meat should be soft and chewy, not crispy. Even Malaysia's Prime Minister, as you see here in this tweet, has tweeted rather sarcastically, "Where do you find people eating crispy chicken rendang?" While one user in one of my favorite tweets said, "If you want crispy chicken, the judges should go to KFC."
Clearly the judges there aren't actually Malaysian.
No.
Diptyque Laurent with the press review. Thank you very much. And for more detail on those stories featured in Diptyque's press review, you can, of course, head straight to our website. The address there, as usual, www.france24.com/in the press.